In the text that Annette read in our hearing today, Jesus is teaching a lesson to a large crowd, and someone seeks to distract Jesus. Hey, Jesus, make my brother divide the family inheritance with me. In Jewish law, the older brother got 2/3 of the inheritance, while the younger brother got 1/3, of course. The daughters, of course, got
Nothing.
absolutely nothing. For all we know, this distractor could have been the very prodigal son, trying to get Jesus to take up for him before he got up enough nerve to ask for his inheritance from his father. Whoever it was, Jesus was taken off his point for a moment. Jesus was distracted. Jesus replied, "Who sent me to be a judge or an arbiter over you? I am not here to settle family fiduciary fights." But because God is the God of all possibilities from every perspective, Jesus turns the heckler's distraction into a God moment. So the story that Annette read for us, Jesus begins by saying, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist of material possessions." In this Jesus tale, the farmer was already extremely wealthy. And on top of his fortune, he had good fortune. His land was producing abundantly. At a time when there were people living on the streets and under the overpasses and at freeway entrances and exits with nothing to eat, this rich man was trying to figure out how to stuff his already overstuffed barns with all of the excess wheat and grains. He didn't see the street people, those who subsist because of their donations to the Burbank Temporary Aid Center. Those who are making it because of the little Whitechapel food pantry right out the social hall door. He couldn't see them. He couldn't see around his giant silos. He had more produce than he could ever use if he could just stuff it into his big barns. During Jesus' time, if you were the owner of a silo, it was generally understood that you intended to get richer while the rest of us got poorer. Well, wait a minute, you might ask. What is so wrong with profiting during the seller's market? Isn't that American? Isn't that what we do? Isn't that how we've made our money? Isn't that how fortunes are made? Isn't that how you and I gain security? Yes. But in this parable, this man thinks he is going to live forever. And his life is over that night. Secondly, God has been rich toward this man, abundantly rich toward this man. But the man was not rich toward God. In a society where God was the reason, where God was praised for every good thing as God was in first century Jerusalem, without question, there is no part of the story that says the man in his gratitude set aside something for the temple or gave his overabundance to God by giving to those on the street. Jesus came to save the lost and the poor. We all agree on that. Jesus came to bring life to a political society and a spiritual society that was committing murder. Therefore, being fortunate to be wealthy and then being distracted by your wealth in the midst of such abject poverty, Jesus points out, is foolish and is evil. Both the Hebrew Bible and also the Christian New Testament have as their themes, be rich toward God. The prophet Micah says God requires that we walk humbly with God by doing justice and loving kindness. New Testament bringer of the gospel, Jesus Christ, tells us to love our neighbors as ourselves. Little Whitechapel elders pray 2 prayers at this table every Sunday. They just pray them. The first prayer is asking God to bless the holy act of communion. Make us worthy for this time with God. The second prayer after communion is always to give thanks for God's bounty to us and to bless us as we share it with the rest of the world. Meanwhile, the rich man is stuffing overstuffed silos, and when that won't work, planning to tear them down so that he can build new ones. Adam Chandler, who writes for The Atlantic, reports that as we collect food for the Burbank Temporary Aid Center and the Little Whitechapel Food Pantry, roughly 50% of all produce in the United States is thrown away. 50% of all produce in the United States is thrown away, some 60 million tons, or $160 billion worth of produce annually, an amount consisting to 1/3 of all foodstuffs is all thrown away. The Environmental Protection Agency has found that wasted food is the single biggest filler of American landfills. Why, with people starving, do we throw away so much food? Chandler theorizes that Americans are concerned with the appearance of food. If it does not look television commercial perfect, we won't touch it. Food has to look right. Packagers know this, so defective-looking food that is absolutely fine otherwise is thrown away before it reaches store shelves or the pantry or BTAC or other nonprofit food banks. We manufacturers and we consumers, like Jesus' rich man, are not particularly rich toward God or anybody else. Today, a trustee, Annette Graziani, announced for the second or third time that Little Whitechapel has received a huge new supply of offering envelopes. And the first time she said it, I quipped that the finance committee loves full offering envelopes. And I should have added, they love full squishy offering envelopes. They don't like to shake the envelopes and hear anything in there. Ooh, that feels fat. You know, the kind with checks and cash inside. The counters they count every Sunday after church, and they don't mind counting if we give them something to count. Little Whitechapel is open 7 days a week, usually all day and part of the night. Several congregations are able to worship here that otherwise would have no home. Little Whitechapel is a place where enrichment groups like Alateen, Al-Anon, and Learn to Speak Spanish classes for little ones, and Mommy and Me classes for small kids, and Overeaters Anonymous, and Debtors Anonymous groups, and a women's prayer group that has a shofar that they play at this most interesting time. Just to name some, they all meet in this building. Every day we are greeting somebody new. Every day we're greeting somebody else who wants to meet in this building. And yet they cannot donate enough to keep this rich, diverse ministry going. They cannot donate enough to keep these lights on, this air conditioning running in all the rooms. This building has at least 6 or more restrooms to clean. Ask Helga, she knows. And there's salaries that have to be paid. They cannot donate enough to keep all of that running. In addition, our regional church has emergency funds to help seniors who have big-ticket medical expenses. Yet Little Whitechapel endeavors to keep learning in the 21st century new ways to be rich toward God. So here's a question to ponder. How can you and how can I, with our tithes and our offerings and our special gifts, look at our overstuffed silos and become richer towards God? How can we continually underwrite this not so little Whitechapel? 21,000 square feet, is that not so small? Not just so that we have a nice, cool place to worship in the summer and a cozy, warm place to worship in the winter, but how can we weekly or bi-weekly or monthly set aside a portion of our bounty to underwrite our beloved worship space so that we are rich towards God, rich back to God? You might be interested to know that some members of Little Whitechapel have left parts of their estates to Little Whitechapel. Others have invested in the Christian Church Foundation so that they receive an annual stipend, and so does Little Whitechapel. I don't handle one dime of Little Whitechapel's offering, but if you would like to know more about that, please contact me or Annette or our treasurer, Brandy Schultes. Being rich toward God. Did you know that in every congregation, 10% of those who attend are financially supporting the ministry of the entire church? Little Whitechapel has Ministry for Mission written into its budget. Every year, Little Whitechapel systematically writes checks that go to mission at home and mission away. A dear member asked me last week, well, why can't we do more for mission? I wanted to respond, that is a question that only you can answer. The Obama administration announced a public-private campaign to cut in half the more than 2 million calories that Americans waste annually by the year 2030 by focusing on improving food efficiency, recycling, decoding food labels, and finding ways to deliver food to the 1 in 6 Americans that are hungry. Meanwhile, startups like the Bay Area's Imperfect Produce are starting to deliver ugly but otherwise consumable goods at a discount. Kids at the seminary, and you and Julie might know something about this, are teaching classes on how to dumpster dive. France has banned supermarkets from throwing away food by directing them to compost or donate all expiring or unsold food, all. Germany is focusing on reforming expiration dates. In 2 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul instructs, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Oh God, I want to be cheerful when I'm writing my offering check. I really do. But I know there are times when you have to pry it out of my hand. Giving money is not easy. It takes planning. I personally have a 5-year plan to increase my Little Whitechapel giving every year. I hope and pray that I will be able to increase it more. Please join me in praying over and planning what you can systematically give to Little Whitechapel, more than in fits and starts, but on a continual basis. It is part of worship. Our God of love and mercy that we worship wants all of God's children to be the benefactors of the riches of the earth, of the riches of this life. It's great to give to big campaigns like UNICEF or Stuff a Bus, and to give through philanthropic organizations that work all around the world. Many of us started doing that when we were kids. In grateful response for what God has done for us, how can we give through Little Whitechapel so that more people are clothed, more people are fed, and the message of God's love for all and God's benevolence for all comes in and then goes out these doors? How can all of us tweak and improve what some of us are already doing, what some of us have a notion to do, and what some of us think is somebody else's responsibility? So that every day we tear down our own silos and see that every day more and more of God's family are recipients of God's family inheritance to all. What can we do? God, we are inlets of your bounty. You have given us this gorgeous earth. And then you've given us light on this earth. And then you've given us light in this paradise part of earth, a place where the sun almost always shines, where winter means putting on a sweater. Teach us how to systematically, in our own spots and in our own corners, be outlets of all that you have given. Some of us don't have a lot to give. Help us share anyway. Some of us could do better. Help us figure that out. In your Son's name we pray.